Over the last few sessions, we have been reading The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and we are about to find out what happens in the end. My name is Andrew, and with me I have Emily. Say hello, Emily.
Hello.
There's Emily, and I have Lyle. Say hello, Lyle.
Hello, everyone.
And together we make up Wild Geese Theatre Company. Wild Geese Theatre Company is a company that travels around the country making theatre for people just like you. And during these strange times, we've decided to turn to the internet so that we can keep sharing stories in the hope that it makes people feel better. That's the plan. So let's have a little recap of what we've been up to over the past few sessions. So far, Mary Lennox, our main character, she has moved from India and has found herself living in a strange and unusual country manor in the heart of Yorkshire. Mary's a strange little girl. She spends all of her time by herself, and she doesn't really trust people in the way that a lot of young people do, because a lot of people have let her down. It's made her quite sharp. It's made her quite mean, quite spiteful. However, the more time she spends here in Yorkshire, the more Mary has begun to soften. She even starts to make friends with people, the people who live and work in the manor. And I think most importantly is Mary has found some solace, some quiet and some peace in the gardens of this country manor. And one garden in particular has got her incredibly excited. The promise that out there somewhere, there is a secret garden, a garden that no one is allowed to enter. Now, Mary has set herself the task of finding this garden and restoring it back to life. I think what we should do is we should jump straight in. We should find out where we were. We're about to read chapter 5. It's the middle of the night. Mary has just met the master of the house, Master Craven, who is her uncle, and has decided that, well, she quite likes Master Craven and thinks that the rumours about him being as sour as a crabapple, well, they're not particularly founded. Let's find out what happens next. Chapter 5, The Cry in the Corridor. The rain began again that night. It beat against the window, waking Mary up. She listened as the wind howled round the house and down her chimney. She tried, but could not get back to sleep. Stupid wind, she thought. Then she heard another sound. It sounded like crying. She sat up. It was someone crying. She tiptoed out of bed and opened her door. The crying was coming from the other side of the house, from the part she wasn't allowed to explore. Taking her candle, she made her way along the corridor. The crying was much louder here, and soon Mary came to a door where a glimmer of light spilled into the corridor. She swallowed hard and stepped into the huge room. There was a fire glowing, throwing shadows onto large, handsome furniture. And in a four-poster bed, a boy about her own age was crying his heart out. The boy had huge dark eyes that seemed too big for his thin, pale face. When he saw the light from Mary's candles, his eyes widened even further, but the crying stopped. Who are you? The boy asked, his voice trembling. Are you a ghost? No, I'm Mary Lennox. I live here. Who are you? I'm Colin. Colin? Colin Craven. My father is master of this house. Oh, Mary gasped. I didn't know Mr. Craven had a son. Well, he does. Not that he cares, Colin sniffed. That makes us cousins, Mary said, and told him who she was. Didn't anyone tell you about me? No, they probably didn't. Why? Mary asked. I don't like new people. I don't like being looked at, Why not? Colin wiped the tears from his eyes. Because I have a humpback, like my father, any day now. If I live long enough to get a humpback, that is. Why won't you live long enough? Colin stared at Mary crossly. Because I am so weak and ill, isn't it obvious? It's not obvious to me. You just look thin and pale, a bit like I did when I came from India. What does your father do to help? My father hates me, Colin growled. He hates me because when I was born, my mother died. The only time he comes in this room is when he thinks I'm asleep. How old are you? Mary asked. 10. The same as me, Mary replied. The same length of time the secret garden had been locked up, she thought. Mary remembered Martha telling her about the broken swing. Poor Mrs. Craven, dying without ever seeing her baby. Tell me about India, Colin said, breaking into Mary's thoughts. So Mary told him about India, about the heat and the monsoons and the elephants and tigers and rajas. Colin listened until he began to fall asleep. Mary felt tired too. I'm going back to my room now, she said softly. You must come again, he told her, his voice far away. Come again soon. That's the end of the chapter. A new character has been introduced to our story. Emily, do you have any questions that have popped to mind having heard that chapter?
Oh my goodness. Well, a few, but I think the main one is why on earth? Why is he stuck in that room?
Yeah.
And why, given the just what you said before you started the chapter, that to me, Master Craven seemed to be lovely and a really gentle soul. And for Colin to say that his dad hates him and only goes in there when he sleeps.
There's a bit of a mystery there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Why has Mr. Craven kept his son under lock and key? What might make a father keep their son hidden all this time? Interesting.
See
okay.
If we find out.
Shall we? Okay, let's find out. Chapter 6. Can you keep a secret? Oh, miss, Martha cried when Mary told her about Colin. What's wrong? Mary asked. Oh, Mrs. Medlock will think I've told you about him. Oh, I'm in such trouble now. Why? I just will be, Martha said, pacing up and down. Master Colin's probably in one of his tantrums right now. Did he scream at you? No, we just talked. Martha stopped pacing. Talked? What? Like you and me? Yes. Oh, that's a first. What do you mean? He can be a bit difficult sometimes. Maybe he just needs fresh air like I did. Oh, no, we tried that. The worst tantrum he had was when we took him out and one of the gardening lads stared at him by mistake. Master Collins flew into such a temper, he was up all night with a terrible fever. Well, if he was like that with me, I'd just walk out. Martha began pacing again. Oh, I bet he's in a state this morning. I'd best go help see to him. Mary ate her breakfast, deep in thought. What a strange place this was. Secret gardens and secret passageways, boys crying in the night, and boys who talked to animals. Remembering Dickon, she pushed her dish away and went to find her tools. The trouble was, it was pouring down with rain. There would be no gardening today. A few minutes later, Martha came in. She had a strange look on her face. Master Collins wants to see you, she said. All right, Mary said, glad she had something to do. Oh, I just hope Mrs. Medlock doesn't get to hear about this, Martha said to Mary. I'll be in the next room with his nurse if you need help. I shan't need any help, Mary said. She didn't understand why Martha was making such a fuss. Colin was sitting upright against a mountain of pillows. So, you weren't a ghost? No. He grinned and pointed at some books spread out on his bed. Look, I've been finding pictures of some of the things you told me. They sat and chatted. India sounds such a magical place, Colin said. Yes, it is. Not like here. There's nothing magical about living here. It's like a prison. I suppose if you stay in one room every day, it does. Exactly. He looked so glum. It made Mary want to cheer him up. But there's magic here too. What do you mean? Mary hitched closer. Could she trust him? She wondered. He wasn't the same as Dickon, but... There's a secret garden, she whispered, full of the most wonderful things. What? Here, at Misselthwaite? I've never heard of it. Why have I never heard of it? Mary put her fingers to her lips. Shh! Nobody knows. Only I know where it is. And Dickon. Dickon? Martha's brother. He's amazing. And she told Colin about Dickon and his way with animals. Then she described the garden, every bit of it. Colin's face lit up. It does sound wonderful. It is, Mary said. But then she grew worried. She plucked at the bed cover. Colin, you won't tell anyone, will you? You'll spoil it otherwise. They'll stop me from going. Can you keep the secret about the garden? Colin shuffled upwards in bed. Of course, he said. He raised his eyebrows. I've never had a secret before. Mary sighed with relief. The rain didn't stop for several days, but this time, instead of feeling bored and unhappy, Mary had Colin for company. Martha couldn't believe the difference Mary had made to Master Colin's mood. He's like a different boy, she said, following Mary down the corridor towards Colin's room. I think you've put a spell on him. He's just lonely, like I used to be, Mary said, sounding very wise. And when you are lonely, it turns you a bit mean. Martha shook her head and went to chat to Colin's nurse, who couldn't believe the change in Master Collins either. Listen to that, the nurse said, as sounds of laughter were heard coming from Colin's bedroom. Incredible, Martha agreed. What's incredible? Mrs. Medlock asked, coming up behind the pair and startling them. Martha was so shocked to see Mrs. Medlock she couldn't speak. Mrs. Medlock pushed Colin's bedroom door open. What's all this? She cried. What's that girl doing here? Master Collins scowled. I asked her to come, Medlock, he told the housekeeper. Her tone changed immediately. Her voice was soft and smarmy. Oh, but of course, Master Colin. Although your cheeks are flushed, you must not get excited. The girl must leave at once. If anyone must leave at once, Medlock, it's you. Get out. Go on. Shoo, you daft woman. Shoo. Oh, Master Colin. Did you hear what I just said? Colin growled, puffing himself up. Mrs. Medlock fled. Mary began to giggle. You sounded just like a proper little Rajah then, she told him. Colin sniffed. Good, he said. And that's the end of the chapter. It's nice to see Mrs. Medlock getting a bit of a taste of her own medicine. Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. I just one thing that occurred to me sort of early on, which was sort of answered by the end of it, was just why everyone was so surprised, why Martha was so surprised that Mary went and spoke to him. But it seems that everybody else in the house has specifically said, no, you mustn't go in there and speak to him. And what a lovely line. that Mary said that when you're lonely, I don't know.
I'm trying to find it. Yeah.
When you're lonely.
When you are lonely, it turns you a bit mean.
Yeah. It seems like she's the perfect person to teach him how to get out of this loneliness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Connect with people.
It's about somebody who can understand Colin from his perspective, someone who can see through his eyes. Absolutely. And I think Martha provides that for Colin, but also Colin does for Martha as well, which is nice. They kind of have a bond, a kinship in that.
For Mary, yeah.
For Mary, sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Gorgeous. Yeah. And I feel like Mary's a very good storyteller as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, very confident.
Yeah, 100%. Let's see what happens next.
All right then, chapter 7, a tantrum. By the Monday, the rain had cleared and Mary couldn't wait to get outside. Nice as it was to talk to Colin, she had missed the secret garden. She had missed Dickon too. Right, I'm going digging in my garden, she decided after breakfast. Aren't you going to see Master Colin first? Martha asked. No, I've got to grab the sunshine while it's out. I'll call in later. But what if he needs you? Later, Mary repeated. She ran as fast as the moor wind across the grounds, down the side of the long walk, past the kitchen gardens and through to the secret garden. Dickon was already there. You beat me, she said. Oh, there's work to be done, Dickon replied. He began to whistle a tune. Together they dug and pruned and cleared. Green shoots were sprouting everywhere now. Mary was especially pleased to see that the seeds that she had planted were growing. The garden was coming alive. It's grand, isn't it? Mary said. It's nature. All nature's grand. Mary went back to the manor house in such a good mood. She couldn't wait to see Colin and tell him about her morning. Martha, I'm starving, she announced. Oh, sorry, Miss Mary. Lunch is a bit late today, Martha apologised. She looked hot and bothered. What's wrong? Mary asked. Oh, it's Master Colin. He's working his way up to a right tantrum. Mary frowned and listened. Sure enough, the sound of shouting and wailing could be heard along the corridor. Why? What's upset him? Martha looked embarrassed. It's because you didn't come when he asked for you, Miss Mary. What? How silly! Mary felt a wave of anger sweep over her. Mary strode into Colin's room. His face was crimson with screeching. What's the matter with you? She demanded. Colin glared at her. You didn't come to see me. How could I? I've been in the garden. You come when I say I am the master of this house. I am more important than some stupid garden and some stupid boy. Mary's face turned to thunder. I'll come to see you when I please, she declared. And if you ever speak to me like this again, I shan't come at all. She spent the rest of the day in the garden, working twice as hard as she had in the morning. She was still furious. Dickon tried to calm her down and make her see things from Colin's point of view. It's not much of a life for him up there, especially as he has no mam and his dad's always away. Mary did not care one bit. So? I have no one either, but I don't cry like a baby all day. She decided she wouldn't see Colin until she felt like it, which might be never. Never came sooner than Mary thought. In the middle of the night, she was awoken by Martha shaking her arm. Oh, Miss Mary, come quick, she begged. What is it? Mary asked. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. It's Master Colin. He's having hysterics. What are hysterics? Oh, they're like a tantrum, only 20 times worse. Like that time when the gardener's lad stared at him. Oh, come quick, Miss Mary. Nurse thinks you're the only one who can get through to him. Even Mrs. Medlock thinks so. He'll set off one of his fevers, otherwise it might kill him. Now she was fully awake. Mary could hear Colin screaming. It was different from before, higher and louder and more urgent. The sound set her teeth on edge. She put her hands over her ears, but it didn't stop the noise from getting through. "Oh, for goodness sake," she snapped, tugging on her shawl and following Martha down the cold corridor. The nurse looked at Mary with pure relief when she arrived. "Oh, Miss Mary, can you please talk to him? He'll do himself harm if he keeps on like this." Mary felt herself growing angrier and angrier. How dare this boy make everyone do what he wanted? Who did he think he was? She strode up to the screaming boy and stamped her foot. "Colin Craven, shut up this minute!" she shouted. Colin flung himself over so his face was buried in the pillow. He continued to wail and began banging his stick-like arms and legs. "Fine! Scream yourself to death for all I care," Mary fumed. Behind her, somebody gasped, but no one dared to try and stop her. "You're a spoilt brat. There's nothing wrong with you, nothing." "There is. I've felt the lumps. I've felt them." "What lumps?" "On my back. I'm going to be a hunchback." "Where?" Mary asked. She climbed onto the bed and started prodding Colin's back. "There," he said, and pointed to the back of his neck. "There are lumps all down there." Mary tutted out loud. "They're not lumps, you silly thing. That's your backbone. Everybody's got that. Yours just feels lumpy because you're so thin." She got off the bed and Colin turned around. Is that true?" he asked the nurse. "Oh, yes, Master Colin," the nurse nodded. It is. I'm sorry. I didn't know that was what was bothering you. I would have said." "Oh," he sniffed. He ran his fingers along the top of his back. "So I'm like everyone else?" "Yes," the nurse agreed. "And I will live." "I don't see why you shouldn't live to be as old as the hills," she told him. The look of relief on the boy's face was heartbreaking. "Oh," he said. "So, can we get some sleep now?" Mary asked. Colin looked at her. He blinked the rest of his tears away. Will you stay a bit longer, Mary?" He swallowed hard. "Please," he added. Mary agreed. Her temper had gone now. She saw that Colin had been really scared. "It's all right," she said to Martha and the nurse and Mrs. Medlock. "You go. I'll stay until he goes to sleep." The three of them shot her grateful looks and disappeared. "Tell me about the garden," Colin said. So Mary told him about the garden, about how it was turning from grey to green, about all the birds that felt it was a place so safe they could build their nests there, about the buds beginning to show on the rose trees. "I can see it," Colin smiled, his voice sounding far away. "I can see it." That's quite a dramatic chapter. Emily, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, my first thought at one point in the chapter was, why was Colin so angry?
I know.
She'd gone to the garden, and then I don't know about everybody else, and write your own suggestions down, but I think he was jealous.
Yeah, I think he was jealous of Dickon, jealous that they were going outside. And fear does strange things to us as well.
Yeah.
When we're frightened.
Which is what that final part of the chapter really, really showed me. And I guess if I was to really think about it, what was it that Mary did to make him stop when everybody else couldn't calm him down? What was it? And I think it was just as simple as she was honest with him.
Honesty.
Asked him the question, he answered it, and then because she knew what was wrong, she could then deal with it and say no. And as soon as someone was honest with him, he calmed down.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mary's changed really dramatically, hasn't she? Since the start of the book. I love that bit where even Mrs. Medlock shot her a grateful look. You know, she got the respect of Mrs. Medlock. She's really growing up. She's becoming responsible.
And when she said that as soon as she saw how scared he was, she said she was going to stay. She wouldn't have done that at the beginning of the book.
No,
Not at all.
absolutely not. No, she wouldn't have understood. She wouldn't have been able to empathise with Colin. I think
Yeah.
if she hadn't have learned all these lessons that have come her way. All right, let's find out what happens next. Chapter 10.
Yep.
The Newborn Lamb. The next morning, Mary told Dickon all about Colin's tantrum. Poor lad, Dickon said, with more sympathy than Mary had shown. Stuck indoors all day. Dickon looked thoughtful. You know, if he can't see nature, maybe we should take nature to him. Mary looked up. What do you mean? I've got a newborn lamb at home. I found her next to a dead mam on the moor last night. Maybe Master Colin'd like to have a hold and feed her. There's naught nicer than feeding a lamb. Mary thought it was a fine idea. Tomorrow, let's do it tomorrow, she cried. So the next day, Dickon visited Colin in his bedroom. I brought this for you, he said, setting the lamb in Colin's arms. You can feed her if you want. May I? Colin said in awe. The feel of the warm, soft, newborn lamb through his nightgown filled him with tenderness. The poor thing shivered with nerves, just like he did sometimes. As Mary watched Colin feeding the lamb, Dickon looked round the room. What's that? He asked, pointing to a wheelchair in the corner. Colin glanced across. Oh, that's for me if I ever want to get out of bed. I can't walk, you see. My legs are too weak. But I never use it. I hate going out. Would you like to come with us? Me and Mary, see the garden? Dickon asked. I would, Colin agreed, but he's worried people will stare at him, Mary said. Well, what if we fix it so there's nobody to stare? Dickon asked. So that's what they did. Colin made Mrs. Medlock send for the head gardener, Mr. Roach. A puzzled Mr. Roach waited for his orders. At 2:00 this afternoon, I shall be going out in my chair. Mrs. Medlock gasped. But Master Colin! Colin ignored her. And if the fresh air agrees with me, I'll do the same every day. Yes, sir, Mr. Roach mumbled. So it is your job to make sure no one sees me. I want no gardeners on the lawns or anywhere near the walled gardens. Yes, sir. 2:00, sir. No one around. Good. Off you go. Roach left, but Mrs. Medlock began to panic. Oh, but Master Colin, what if you catch a chill? Stop fussing, Medlock. But... Colin glared at her. Oh, yes, Master Colin. Mrs. Medlock sighed. She left with a shake of her head. Whatever was the world coming to? Colin never forgot that day. How Dickon pushed him in his wheelchair along the grounds towards the secret garden. How the smell of fresh air and the feel of the gentle spring breeze on his face wasn't scary at all. It was wonderful. The way his heart beat fast when Mary showed him the very spot where the robin had shown her the key. The cascading ivy hiding the entrance. And when he had leaned forward in his chair to push open the door leading inside the secret garden. Oh, inside was just as Mary had described. Better than any fairy tale. Take me over there. I want, now, over there, he ordered in delight as Dickon wheeled him up to every corner, every nook and cranny in the garden. After a while, when he had seen almost everything, they drew the chair under a plum tree while they got some more work done. The plum tree was about to burst with white blossom, and it formed a canopy under which Colin sat in wonder. Everything is beautiful, he said, then stopped. That's strange. What? Mary asked, glancing up from her digging. Colin pointed. That tree there. It's not got one leaf on it. Everything else has got at least a bit of greenery, but that's quite dead. I wonder why. A silence fell across the garden then. Mary and Dickon knew why. It had been the tree with the swing, and that swing had broken with Colin's mother on it. "How about some music?" Dickon asked. He pulled his pipe from his pocket and began to play. Soft, reedy sounds floated across the garden. Colin smiled. How perfect everything was. "It's magical here," he said several times. "It's magical." Oh, what a lovely chapter, and such an adventure for Colin. Emily, did you have any thoughts?
I just absolutely loved it. How wonderful that he's really taken matters into his own hands, and he said, I know what I need. I need to get outside, all with the help of Mary and Dickon, and it's magical, as you said. Absolutely magical. I just want to hear what happens next, really.
It's nice to sort of see Colin having someone he can trust. Because having trust in someone is the first step to making friends with them, I guess. Like, you have to trust somebody before you can let them in. And I feel like Colin's done that now. It's a big step forward for Colin. And now that he's outside as well. Big day.
Big day, indeed.
Big day. All right, chapter 11, Ben Weatherstaff. Ben Weatherstaff was never one for orders, and the latest one was plain daft. Not do any gardening mid-afternoon, with all the work he had to do? Nonsense. He was seeing to his garden, and Mr. Roach could like it or lump it. So it was a surprise to him when he heard whispering and giggles coming from inside the locked garden. A surprise and a shock. Putting his ladder against the wall, he climbed and peered over. What he saw made him angrier than he'd ever been in his life. That lass laughing and messing about with a lad. "What are you doing?" he yelled at her. "You bad little wench! How dare you go in there? How dare you?" Mary almost dropped her trowel when she saw the old man glowering down at her. "How'd you get in? How'd you get in?" the gardener ranted. I found a key. The robin showed me where it was," Mary stammered. That made Ben almost fall off his ladder with rage. "Don't you make fun of me. Robin, indeed. A vandal, that's what you are. Going where you've no business." He began to shake his fist at her. Mary became quite scared. Colin, who had been hidden from view, called across to Dickon. "Wheel me over there, Dickon, hurry." Ben Weatherstaff's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw Colin coming into view. "Do you know who I am?" Colin demanded, his face as furious as the gardener's. "Well, I reckon that must be Master Colin," Ben replied, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He shook his head slowly. "You look just like her," he whispered. Colin glanced across at Mary and frowned. "Do I? Well, I suppose we are cousins." "Not her," Ben replied. "Your mother, Mrs. Craven. You have her eyes." "Do I?" said Colin, taken aback. "You knew her? You knew my mother?" Ben nodded. "Aye. I helped her in there. She loved to grow things." "This was her garden?" Colin asked. "Aye." For once, Colin was lost for words. "I tried to keep it going," Ben continued. "I used to climb over and do it. Can't get to it now. I'm not as fit as I was. My legs are going gammy, like yours." The old man hadn't meant to be rude, but the comment made Colin angry all over again. He knew he had a weak and feeble body. He only had to look at Dickon to see that. But here in the garden, he felt different, stronger. "My legs aren't gammy," he yelled. "I'll show you." Placing his hands on either side of the chair arms, he slowly began to rise. The blanket covering his lap fell onto the ground. "I could use my legs," Colin repeated, staring up at the gardener. "I can." Ben blinked. Mary and Dickon dared not even breathe as they watched Colin put one foot on the ground, and then the other, until he was standing upright. upright for the first time in his life. "See," Colin said. "I could use my legs, I can." "Aye," Ben nodded. He felt tears in his eyes. Colin flopped back down to his chair with a proud grin on his face. That night, Colin slept long and deep. When he woke, refreshed and full of energy, he had a plan. "I'm going to learn to walk," he told Mary and Dickon as soon as they reached the garden. "It will be like a scientific experiment. I shall record my progress and write a paper on it for a scientific journal. I shall probably end up rather famous." "Big head," Mary snorted, but underneath she was really pleased. It was the first time Colin had talked of what he would do in the future. What she didn't know was that Colin wasn't doing it just for science. He was doing it so his father would be proud of him. "He'll want to see me when I'm back as well as asleep. When I'm awake as well as asleep," he thought to himself. The first few times he tried to walk, Colin could only shuffle forward a few steps with Dickon on one arm and Mary or Ben on the other. Slowly, over the days and weeks, the garden worked its magic. As the trees blossomed and the shoots turned into the most beautiful flowers, Colin, too, changed. His arms grew stronger, his legs grew stronger. He took 3, then 4, then 5, then 6 steps by himself. Then, on a day when even the robin flew down to watch, Colin Craven walked all the way round the garden. By the time summer turned to autumn, he was not just walking, but running too. "Oh, it's a miracle," Ben Weatherstaff said. But the garden hadn't finished working its magic just yet. In a land far, far from Yorkshire, Archibald Craven woke from his dream with a start. It had been so clear, so vivid. In it, he had heard his wife calling him. "Archie! Archie!" He had smelled something in his dream too. The scent of roses. "Oh, Lilias," he whispered. "Lilias, where are you?" "In the garden," came the voice. "In the garden." All day the dream stayed with him. It followed him on his long, lonely walk up the Italian mountainside. It followed him as he paused by the dazzling lake beneath. What didn't follow him, for once, was the dark shadow he had carried around for 10 years. The shadow that clung to him like an ice-cold fog, no matter how far from Misselthwaite Manor he roamed. It was such a strange dream, he thought to himself. So real. "She is calling me back," Archibald thought. "She is calling me home." I mean,
so much
happened. It's so touching, isn't it? Just everyone's reactions to Colin, Colin's own confidence in himself. That bit where
Ben, the guy, so furious at the beginning.
Yeah.
As soon as he sees Colin start to walk and run,
and a tear in his eye.
Yes.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. What do you think this shadow is that's been following Mr. Craven?
So that's the question that I've got.
Yeah.
Well. I've got it written down and I don't know what the answer to it is, but I think one of the many possible answers is maybe the sorrow, the sadness that you feel when you don't have someone that you love or have loved with you all the time. And it's that sorrow, that sadness. And if he's saying that shadow's gone, then it's almost like he knows that there's something else
Yeah,
And she's guiding him rather than him wallowing in it.
Yeah, and being stuck in it. And it's kind of like Colin as well. You know how they mentioned that it's nice to see Colin talk about his future. I kind of feel like maybe Mr. Craven's having a bit of a similar moment there with the shadow gone. It's almost like he can think about his future again. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. Beautiful.
Chapter 12?
What an amazing chapter. Okay, let's go.
Okay, coming home. A few days later, Archibald Craven returned to Misselthwaite Manor. He didn't even go in the house. He went straight to his wife's garden. It was in here the voice had called him. When he reached the ivy-covered wall, he hesitated. What if this was just a dream after all? What if he found what he always found? Emptiness. He began to turn back. Just then, he heard sounds coming from inside the garden, sounds of running and laughter. It couldn't be. The sounds, fast, heavy footsteps and panting, came closer. Next, the ivy curtain swung back and a boy burst at full speed straight into his arms. There was a moment's silence as they looked at each other. "Father?" the boy asked. Archibald Craven just stared. This couldn't be Colin, this tall, handsome boy. But it was. The eyes gave it away. He had Lilia's beautiful eyes. A faint smell of roses floated past, and Mr. Craven swallowed hard. "Come in," Colin said. "Come into the garden." At last, Mr. Craven spoke. "Of course," he said. "Of course, Colin. I'll come into the garden." It was where he should have been all along. Mary and Dickard could only stand and stare as Colin and his father walked round the garden together, arm in arm. "You did that?" Dickon said. "Me?" Mary asked. You made the garden come alive, and you made them come alive too." Mary looked around the garden. The place was a feast of autumn yellow and purple, and flaming scarlet. Late roses climbed and hung and clustered. The dark afternoon sun shone down on the leaves and made everything appear like a temple of gold. "Not me," said Mary. "It was the magic of this place. The magic of the secret garden." And that's the end of our story. And what an ending it is. Such a happy moment for the whole family and everyone involved. Emily, did you have any thoughts?
It's just so beautiful to see how much every character grows so much throughout that book, and I think that could be something really interesting to reflect back on, looking at the moments, or even if they're just small little moments or big moments, where a character, whether it's Mary or Colin or
Dickon or Mr. Craven, even Martha,
yeah, just those moments that make people really shift. And there are so many moments in it.
That's it. So many gorgeous little moments to grow, aren't they? They're moments for the characters to grow, and they all grow closer together. The magic of the secret garden. It almost has a few different types of magic in my mind. I think there's something truly magical about that place. I think that Mr. Craven's dream and the robin are all part of that very special kind of magic. But there's also that magic that a place has when everybody tries their best to make it better. And that kind of magic you can find at home, or you can find in like a classroom with your classmates, where there's a magic when everyone pulls together. Does that make sense?
It does. The magic of looking after something and nurturing something, and nurturing it or helping it to its full potential. And that's with people, that's with nature.
Yeah.
That's just, you know, in all aspects of life, kindness and trust and love creates all sorts of magical things.
It absolutely does. All right, I think we better sign off now. I just want to say thank you so much for listening in. We've been Wild Geese Theatre Company. If you've listened to this and you really like it and you want to share it, please do. You can find it on YouTube. Also, all the links to everything is on our website, www.wildgeesetc.co.uk/imagine. We'd also like to say a huge thank you to the Westminster BIDs who have helped make this project a reality. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much. Lyle, why don't you play us out? Yeah, there we go.